Great to be with you, Stephen. Thank you very much for organizing. You're doing an amazing job.
Thank,
Amazing.
thank you very much.
Thanks,
So,
Stephen, for having us back.
sure, thank you. So, why don't each of you take a minute to tell us who you are and what you've been doing the last 10 years, just so everyone could hear you and get a chance to hear your background. So, why don't we go with Dr. Rao, then Dr. Pai, then Dr. Dorsey.
Thanks for having me, Steve. So I am been doing integrative medicine in Maryland, and I see patients in a holistic avenue, kind of balancing, most focused on stress reduction and the role that it plays in, health and in longevity. I also focus a lot on teaching people lifestyle techniques and doing cooking classes. We have a cookbook out as well for Body on Fire, and really want to focus on what the control of disease states are for people. So we focus a lot on cooking and food and nutrition, reading labels, just the basic foundation of staying well, movement, sleep promotion, stress reduction, and change my practice to include all that in terms of an integrative internal medicine practice.
Thank you. Dr. Pai?
Hi, my name is Dr. Pai. I'm an integrative medicine physician. Thanks for the great intro. I've been practicing in integrative medicine for over now 24 years. And we just bring an evidence-based approach, looking at epigenetics with our patient, diet, lifestyle, environment, belief system. We evaluate things that trigger inflammation, stress, diet, microbiome, toxicities. We kind of take the full person approach. And then similar to like Jyothi does, we teach, we have cooking classes. We go shopping with our patients. It's really helping the lifestyle. We incorporate a lot of Ayurvedic medicine, Chinese medicine. I do a lot of what they call neuroacupuncture and a variety of other techniques that we utilize. And in the last 10 years specifically with my experience is that we help formulate natural products, and we run them and assist them through getting patents and clinical trials and kind of bringing the level of evidence of using natural therapies on a level similar to like pharmaceutical standards. And so that's something that we've been doing. And this year we'll be coming out with the in terms of like how we have our Boss Merrick, which is our kind of our flagship over the last 16 years. We're going to have a series of products coming out in different categories, all with similar results in terms of clinical trials and studies like that, showing benefits, safety, and efficacy and purity. And this is something that will kind of again raise levels of game-changing experience for their patients to reduce the risk of side effects and kind of looking at helping improve the physiology rather than just treat the symptoms.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ray. I'm a neurologist at the University of Rochester. I'm a Parkinson's specialist, and over the past 6 years or so, I've becoming increasingly convinced that Parkinson's disease is fundamentally preventable, that the world's fastest growing brain disease is due to environmental toxins in our food, such as pesticides, in our water, such as dry cleaning chemicals, in our air, such as air pollution. If we get rid of these environmental toxins, we get rid of Parkinson's disease.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Dr. Dorsey, if you could take your 2-hour lecture that you gave today and condense it to the 30 seconds of what you believe are the greatest contributors to Parkinson's. And then if Dr. Rao and Dr. Pai can tell us if we were already exposed to these things, even though we're going to try in the future not to be exposed, but if we believe we were exposed, is there anything that either of you are aware of that we could do to help get this out of our body? So, Dr. Dorsey, would you start?
Sure, everyone calls me Ray. So I think the three major environmental toxins that are responsible for Parkinson's disease are one, certain pesticides, including a pesticide called Paraquat, and as well as some fat-soluble pesticides, organochlorines. Second are two dry cleaning chemicals, one called trichloroethylene, one called perchloroethylene. These are really, really, really simple molecules. All of you know that water is made up of 3 atoms, 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen. Trichloroethylene is 2 carbons, 1 hydrogen, and 3 chlorines, hence its name trichloroethylene. And perchloroethylene just means 4, and so it's got 4 chlorine atoms. These are the same chemicals that are under Camp Lejeune. These are the same chemicals that are in Woburn, Massachusetts, and responsible for civil action, Toms River, New Jersey, Silicon Valley. They're associated with a 500% increased risk of Parkinson's disease, and they cause cancer. And the third is air pollution, like outdoor air pollution. Many of these toxins all we inhale, and one of the pathological features of Parkinson's disease is early pathology in our smell centers of our brain.
Okay, so Dr. Pine, Dr. Rao, assume that we were exposed to these things, and are we just helpless? Is there anything you could comment on about that?
My feeling about all toxicants and toxins is that we have more control than we think in terms of changing the way our body metabolizes these. Focusing on gut health and focusing on the gut microbiome to create a diverse microorganism panel that is inclusive when we eat variety of different foods, bright colors. In terms of staying broad spectrum, I would just say, eating the rainbow can grow multiple organisms that can help fight us. We're resilient beings. And I think that when we focus on things like the vagal tone and we focus on lymph and we focus on things that detoxify us, like the liver health, it gives us a lot of power and strength. Is it everything? Maybe not. But I think that staying stable in our sympathetic parasympathetic system, working on our vagus nerve to try to create some balance in our healing mechanisms, because when our vagus nerve is happy, it kind of helps us heal, as well as working on liver detoxification through things like cruciferous vegetables and sulforaphane and things that help our body get toxins out. There's many food groups that are associated with different phases of liver, phase 1 and phase 2 detoxification. So diet, nutrition, sleep, all the same stuff we've talked about. If we can get our bodies, we're giving it a fighting chance to try to get the toxins out.
Yeah, I agree exactly with what Jyothi said. And then what we would do is like we like to measure those aspects of detoxification, and then so then we can further enhance what they might need to eat more, or give them even more targeted therapies for helping that. But one thing that we have to also understand is that aside of the 3 chemicals or 4 chemicals that Ray's talked about, there's just so many more chemicals that we just don't know about, right? So forever chemicals, and just most recently, 3 weeks ago, most of us have seen the endarterectomy studies looking at cardiovascular plaque and finding microplastic and nanoplastic in about 70% of those patients' plaque. So one of the things that that article started to dig further into is, can some of these particles, since it's in the vasculature and the circulation, can some of that actually cross blood-brain barrier and get into the brain, right? And could these also be other things that are causing some of these initiation of more inflammatory triggers and responses in the brain, causing tals and tangles and plaques and all these things like that? Ray would know more than anybody, but the idea is that there's a lot of things that are coming in, unfortunately. So like cleaning up the environment is key, but I think also, strengthening the detoxification markers is key. Lowering inflammation and increasing the immune system functioning so the body's able to fight, fix, and repair as much as possible. Because even though there's chemicals coming in probably more and more every day, it's strengthening the body in those variety of factors, and also looking at nutrition as a key factor and focus to enhance the body's ability to keep up with the onslaught of more and more toxins coming from the environment.
Should we be taking a daily far red infrared sauna? Should we be doing colonics or enemas? Should we be doing detox baths? Should we be doing foot detoxes? Is there something else that, aside from diet, that we should be doing to get this stuff out of our body that you're aware of?
Are you asking me, or who are you asking?
Anyone that has a thought.
Everybody can go first, because
okay. So I think that working on our detox systems, sweating is a detox. So, trying to get our body to sweat, if that's a sauna, has some data on aiding in sweating. We can work on, having normal bowel movements, for example, in terms of the detox potential, drinking, pure, clean water, and having a diet that's helpful for those nutrients that help with the liver is always a great place to start. The additional things there's some data on, cold therapy as well as sauna that can help facilitate levels of detoxification. I think that's an adjunctive thing. Does everybody have to go out and buy one today? No. I think starting with the basics and the foundations are always helpful. I love Epsom salts for all that it does for people. The fact that it has trace minerals, the fact that it has magnesium in there that does 300 different things in our bodies that helps our immune system, is a great simple thing that people can do at home. I don't think it needs a lot of investment. I feel like going back to the basics and something simple as sleep, for example, is a huge way that we detoxify. So working on things with meditation and deep breathing to help promote sleep can also be a fantastic start.
Thank you.
I'll let Ray go next.
I think there's probably some things that we can do to modify the disease course. Clearly, stress is a major thing that can exacerbate Parkinson's disease. Clearly, decreased sleep is not good for brain health and cognitive function. I think another thing we should be thinking about, even if you already have the disease, is minimize ongoing exposure to these toxicants. So if I had Parkinson's, I'd be fanatical about avoiding pesticides in all forms, whether that's in my food, in my yard, or in my golf course, or my soccer field, or in the air around where I live. So I think there are tons and tons of things that people with Parkinson's disease who already have the disease can do that might modify the disease course. We need better evidence for these things. We need to be studying these things. But I think there are things that we can do in our environment to decrease ongoing exposure. Just like the advice you'd give to any smoker who had lung cancer to stop smoking, I think any advice that you give to someone with Parkinson's is stop being exposed to neurotoxicants in our food, water, and air.
Thank you.
So in my experience, in my opinion, is that many of those things don't work, right? Because a lot of people are trying to sell, and a lot of things that you just mentioned is like selling a program of detoxification. But if you don't have the right diet, none of those things are beneficial, right? So it's going back. Even Jyothi mentioned, like, you got to get the diet right. If you're not eating a whole food plant-based diet, if you're not having enough fiber, enough phytonutrients, enough antioxidants, enough anti-inflammatory foods, if you don't have that, then the whole idea of like sitting into a sauna is very limited in terms of getting true benefits. Everybody wants the quick fix. But what we like to look at is like looking at then measuring their detoxification markers, or measuring the outcome of how measuring their microbiome and figuring out and functioning. Is that important enough that they can then go out? Because you're not going to detox in a foot bath chemicals. At least from my information and my knowledge in 25 years, I've not seen that happen. Everybody wants to sweat it out. And sweat can help with detoxification, but when they measure the sweat, like, we see a high concentration, but it's a high concentration because it's a lower total amount of volume of fluid coming out. The biggest detoxification is through the bowel, still through the kidney, through the liver, and through the GI tract. Right. So I'm not against sweating at all, but a lot of people want to just like, well, let me sweat. I have cancer. Let me sweat this out, or I have some kind of disease. Like, you need to be putting in anti-inflammatory, clean foods, as much antioxidant rich foods, nutrient dense foods, making sure the whole microbiome in the system is functioning to get rid of those things before you just jump in and buying a device or measure some kind of program and all. And again, going on the colonics, which I've mentioned for 4 years on this program, because that question comes up. We have data, because we do microbiome testing on all these patients for the last 20 years, is that colonics actually dysfunction and damage the microbiome. It destroys diversity of the microbiome, and you just can't replenish that easily with a probiotic, for example. It does cause inflammation to the bowel. It also causes more dysbiosis, different types of overgrowths, and it's also very drying for especially patients who are going to be a little bit more vata from an Ayurvedic perspective in nature. So I don't recommend colonics at all.
Okay, thank you. So, Dr. Rao and Dr. Pai, you've both written books on inflammation. So if someone said, you have my full cooperation, I'll do whatever you say, I want to know what the ultimate anti-inflammation diet is, the perfect diet, what would each of you say? And then Dr. Dorsey, for you, what would you say in terms of diet's relation with Parkinson's? Does it have anything to do with it, or does it not make an impact? So if each of you could answer the diet question.
I think the biggest lack that we have in our country, in our food supply, and the way we think about food, is fiber. I feel like we have to be, if there was one deficiency, I would say, is the high fiber diet. And when people think about fiber, they think about, oh, I have a lot of fiber in my diet. When you kind of go into it, they say, oh, I have a salad and I'll have a vegetable at night. Our body needs probably between 45 and 55 grams a day for maintaining the toxic levels, maintaining daily functions, getting our hormones metabolized, all the chemicals that we have in our bodies, our medications. And so fiber grows good guys. Fiber creates diversity of my.
Dr. Rao, your screen froze. Okay. So we'll wait till her screen unfreezes. Dr. Pai, why don't you speak, and then we'll go back to Dr. Rao as soon as she unfreezes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, just keep an eye, because she's frozen on my side too. So we're looking at getting a complete anti-inflammatory diet, which would be a plant-based diet. I think she dropped by mistake. So a plant-based diet is anti-inflammatory, lowers all sorts of inflammatory markers like CRP, IL-6, TNF-alpha, high in omega-3s, has no cholesterol, high in antioxidants, has high in phytonutrients, high in fiber, increases microbiome diversity, has no heterocyclic amines, no TMAO, no IGF-1, no G5/6, has plant iron. It decreases insulin resistance. It increases your resting metabolic rate, and it doesn't create any kind of aged glycation end products. It actually has the lowest amount of nanoplastic and nanoparticles of foods. So all the data will show that eating a plant-based diet, it prevents, reverses, and treats diseases, where an animal protein or animal-centric diet or keto or paleo or any of those kind of animal forward diets don't. Like, the data will show that there is no study showing that eating animal protein reverses heart disease, dementia, cancer, diabetes, or anything like that, right? Those diets are high in inflammation. They're high in omega-6s. They have high cholesterol, which is still the number one cause of death in America, 3 people every minute. Has little to no antioxidants, has no phytonutrients, which then those people have to take tons of supplements to get all their phytonutrients, right? Those are all the colorful compounds in foods. It's high in heterocyclic amines, TMAO, IGF-1. It causes dysbiosis. No matter how much someone might say it's clean or organic, still causes endotoxins and still has dysbiosis in the gut. And that's what we're studying and seeing with the microbiome. And when people restrict carbohydrates and fiber in the diet on a FODMAPs or a keto diet, we now have research and data showing suppression of the healthy bacteria in the microbiome that actually will keep the immune system stronger and allow people to actually enjoy and eat those foods. And so also the animal proteins, aside of all the toxins and all the hormones and antibiotics, it also has the highest amount of nanoplastics and microplastics in it. And the larger the animal, like beef, would have the highest. So that would be the highest concentration of those foods. So eating a anti-inflammatory plant-based diet is what I recommend.
Okay.
So sorry, guys.
Why don't you continue, Dr. Rao, and then we'll.
No, so I was just saying that my first goal would be to try to improve fiber and the colorfulness of the food supply, whether what they're eating is like, if you eat a kale, if you eat raw kale, it grows one bug. If you eat cooked kale, it grows another bug. And so we want to diversify our microbiome as much as possible. The first thing I start off talking to people about is not just more whole foods, more plants, but also creating more colors and diversity. So I ask people to try to get to maybe 30 different items in a week. And that includes herbs and spices, as well as different types of fruits and vegetables and grains and seeds and nuts. So that was my main thing, would be the fiber issue and the diversity.
Thank you.
So for Parkinson's disease, a Mediterranean diet high in animal products, high in fruits and vegetables, low in animal products, is associated with a decreased risk of developing the disease. And some evidence suggests that a Mediterranean diet may be beneficial for people with the disease, consistent with Dr. Pai and Dr. Rao were discussing. I get really concerned about what's in the diet. So, for example, pesticides. There was a study shown in Hawaii where a pesticide that had been banned in the U.S. called heptachlor, the Pineapple Growers Association of Hawaii, or its equivalent, asked for an exemption. And so they sprayed heptachlor to protect their cash crop. And then they fed the tops of the pineapples, the green leafy part, so-called the chop, to the cows. And the cows concentrated this fat-soluble pesticide in their milk. That milk made its way onto the shelves of grocery stores in Hawaii, which led to a recall of milk. Researchers there were just studying the health of older adults in that population and found out that milk consumers in Hawaii had a higher rate of developing Parkinson's disease. When they looked at the brains of these individuals who had been high milk consumers, they found loss of nerve cells in the part of the brain that is known to be damaged in Parkinson's, that produce the dopamine that's lost in Parkinson's. And they found the residue of that pesticide in their brain. So I get really, really, really concerned about what's in the food that we're eating. And so if there are pesticides, if there are industrial chemicals that are making its way into our bodies, we heard about microplastics. If we see those things getting into our body, I get really concerned about them, because many of them damage the energy producing parts of cells, the mitochondria. Our nerve cells are rich in these mitochondria, and these things are toxic. They work to kill off the nerve cells in our brain.
Thank you. Aside from diet being a positive and chemicals being a negative, what other things outside of diet and avoiding chemicals should we be doing to prevent inflammation? And what other things outside of diet and chemicals should we be doing to prevent Parkinson's. Good. Dr. Rao, then Dr. Pai, and then Ray.
One of my biggest focuses is kind of the control of the stress response. And so I think that, with the way that our adrenals as well as our vagus nerve communicate with the brain, and the inflammation that changes when cortisol goes up and the vagus nerve goes down, there's a lot more inflammatory cytokines that get released, and these signaling messages can get very confusing in the body and create all these itises. So a simple thing that I think would really help neurocognitive health or any sort of organ health would be a concept of stress reduction on a daily basis, whether that's meditation or yoga or deep breathing. But it should not be a workout. It should not be, I go to my yoga class 2 times a week and so I'm good. It's literally a daily practice once or twice a day to kind of calm down the system. And I think periods of quiet and silence are really, really essential. And that also goes for periods of fasting, and which help the gut microbiome regenerate and create resilience genes within our body. So I would add another big intervention aside from what we've heard already is the concept of creating more quiet silence and maybe periods of time where we're more fasting or not eating. One of our biggest tools for longevity and aging can be caloric restriction, which is very hard to do. But if you kind of change the way that we eat and not eat 12 hours in a day, but maybe eat 8 hours in the day, I think that simple concept can go a long way when it comes to metabolic issues, cognitive health, and many, many other sources of inflammation within our body. That would be another thing that I would focus on.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree, 100%. We aside of the diet and aside of the chemicals, it's it's because stress triggers inflammation, as we know, just by itself, right? So we can put an animal or a human in the biosphere, control all the environment, organic food, clean air, clean environment, have perfect exercise. A couple of those people don't get along together in the biosphere, and what happened in the results? All their inflammatory markers went off the chart, right? So we know that in the perfect world, and if you had a laboratory rat as a human in these studies, stress causes inflammation. We know that, right? So stress, you can be completely plant-based and have stress and still have a heart attack. You can still get cancer. You can, stress is the underlying emotional inflammation that is upon all of us, particularly in 2024 this year, and since what we've gone through the last couple of years of a lot of stress worldwide with pandemic and everything else like that in politics. So I agree with Jyothi, like doing some kind of mindfulness meditation. We like to practice heart rate variability practices and actually get biofeedback and really train our clients how to really bring that result, because that lowers, when people have the heart rate variability balanced, it will lower inflammation directly. It will increase natural killer cell functioning and actually increases longevity as well. So these are simple things aside of controlling the diet and lifestyle, because some things we know we don't have control over, and stress is a bigger one. So stress is super important. Having sense of community, having love, happiness, these are other things that are not necessarily pills, but these are really important, because when we look at also like blue zone people, again going back to that kind of concept, is that the blue zone people, we have decided their diet and their environment, is we're looking at what are the other social economic kind of things that they're still working with. And as we get older here, unfortunately, we're a country or a community that kind of strips away adults as they get older in terms of that community or sense of purpose and keeping the brain active. And we have to start doing some of those things, because those also keep us a little bit more resilient and protect us from some of these onslaught of chemicals and toxins that we may not be perfectly able to avoid.
Thank you.
The one I would add is the big one is exercise in terms of likely modifying the disease course. So vigorous exercise, equivalent to 3.5 to 4 hours a week of running or swimming. I was late today because I was not biking fast enough. Has been associated with a 20% decreased risk of developing Parkinson's disease decades later. For people with Parkinson's disease, exercise likely modifies the disease course, and certainly a benefit.
Thank you. So following up on the question of stress, a lot of people are interested in asking Dr. Pai about his Bosmeric product. He's spoken about it. He put a lot of time and effort. It has great benefits. It's anti-inflammatory, and there's a lot of really great properties to it. And a lot of us really are interested because we think if we take this, then that'll make us healthier. So we're very interested. But which is more powerful in your mind, Dr. Pai? If we had to choose We could take bosmeric, but we also, the same time or hour that we take the bosmeric, we fill our heart with hate towards Donald Trump or Joe Biden, or we don't take it and we keep our heart open. In other words, is our thoughts creating chemicals in our body that are the equivalent of the food, the drugs, the supplements? Like, is thinking in a loving, compassionate, empathetic, grateful way actually a scientific thing that creates drugs in your body, and thinking with resentment and judgment and hate a scientific thing that creates chemicals? Or is it just a nice thing that we like to say that you should, because we think it's nice to say?
No, so there is data to show that, right? So that's what we're trying to fill with love, contentment, and that's why some people who live in areas or in communities that have that environment, they are healthier on one level. However, I don't like to pit, like saying like, well, should they take Bosmeric or should they have an open heart? I'd be doing both. And the reason is because what you said, it is a very stressful time, right? And so we all can't go into a mountaintop and live with some kind of guru or live in a cave or something like that. We live in the city, or we live in the rural area. We're living in America right now, where, as you're mentioning, there's hatred on both sides of the aisle, which is causing inflammation to everyone. So I'm someone who's looking at risk reduction. I'm not a perfectionist. I'm a risk reductionist. So I would be doing both. I'd be taking Bosmeric because I would still want to lower the inflammatory responses they're having. Even if you have a healthy lifestyle, we're being more now proactive. We can help with the epigenetic factors. We can help stimulate genes that we want to turn on and help stimulate genes that we want to turn off, and turn down hundreds of different inflammatory markers that we should be turning down, because we're also going to be exposed to a lot of these variety of these other things like chemicals, and we talked about pro-inflammatory foods. But I'd also be working on having an open heart, or being more heart-centered, because as we all know, that's triggering inflammation. So I don't want to be taking an anti-inflammatory and kind of decreasing the efficacy of that. I'd want to be doing both. So I'm someone who would double down on doing both to reduce the reduction of inflammation, both from a mind perspective and a body perspective as well.
Dr. Rao and Ray, would you like to answer that also?
I have never found any one intervention to be the end all be all in isolation. So I feel like this product sounds like it's amazing, and I might actually want to talk to you about it afterwards to see if I can use it in my practice, because it sounds awesome. But I think that, like most things that come in packages and supplements, they're useful in conjunction with other things. And I feel like with my 30 years in medicine right now, no two people have the same path in terms of having the same diagnosis, and their interventions are very subject to what their body has the reserve to do, the resilience that they have. But almost cumulatively, because of epigenetics, because we can change so many things with lifestyle, optimism and hopefulness is such a powerful tool as well. There is data that shows that it can increase longevity by 11 to 15%. And so to work on positive emotions on a daily basis, and that's where things like meditation and exercise and keeping journals of gratitude, as well as kind of journals doing, thoughts of kindness, and kind of journaling happy moments, not just sad moments, but doing acts of random kindness to people, can grow our potential for becoming more optimistic and hopeful and create more positive emotions. So just like anything else, I feel like it's a work in progress, because people don't necessarily, when they're ill, start off being very hopeful sometimes, but we can all cultivate it and become more hopeful. And I think at the end of the day, the studies are showing that people are becoming more resilient. They recover from heart disease better. They're living longer because of hopefulness. Is it going to definitely cure cancer? Maybe not, but it's part of the solution of why not try to be doing the best we can with the tools that we have.
Thank you.
I'm not familiar with the product, so I'll pass.
Well, just more on the impact of our thoughts, our compassion or empathy or non-judgment. Does this create, we talk about food and supplements and drugs. Does this create chemicals in our body that positively and negatively affect us, or is that something that we don't really know enough about?
I don't know, but I would advise it. I think there's lots of moral philosophy and centuries of teaching that suggests that that's the way all of us should be living our lives.
Okay. During the 17-day conference, there's a lot of participants and speakers that have a natural approach to health, towards diet and health, and many of them are very open to encouraging complementary types of integrative medicine. What part of mainstream medicine would you encourage us to embrace and use? In other words, some of us are really feeling like we're very skeptical when we hear someone advise us to follow mainstream medical protocols and pharmaceutical drugs because of a lot of the things we read. And it's possible that we've gone too far to one direction. So what part of mainstream medicine do you like? Would you encourage us to embrace and be open to? All three of you could answer that.
Who first?
I'll try it. So one, we should recognize the grave shortcomings in mainstream medicine. So I think we're all around the same age. So 25 years ago, life expectancy today in the United States is lower than it was 25 years ago when I was in medical school. We spend 50% more on healthcare today than we did 25 years ago when I was in medical school. So clearly, the solution to improving health and well-being is not to spend more on doctors and hospitals. Second is what is really valuable, I think, are physicians, clinicians who are dedicated to caring for people instead of doing things to people. So I always tell my family members and others, is a doctor caring for you or are they doing something to you? If they're caring for you, that's a really, really good sign of a clinician. If they're doing something to you, then I think you have to be a little more circumspect.
Thank you.
I think that mainstream medicine has definitely a role. I mean, when it comes to things that are life-saving, I'm not going to poo-poo any sort of interventions, the surgeries, chemotherapy. We have amazing technology that can do a lot, organ replacement, things like that. I think that we don't put enough focus on the control that each individual has in their own health destiny, which is, instead of going to the doctor all the time for things that they feel like, or kind of a whack-a-mole medicine, which is I have a pain here, so we're going to whack it with this, and then I'm going to get a side effect, I'm going to whack it with that. The whole big picture is to step back, and I think going back to the basics, Dr. Pai had spoken about the blue zones and, simply living, like simple life, which is being out in nature, walking on the grass, eating whole foods, things that aren't spoiled, going back to basic stuff of living, sleeping more, Sundays off where we're not working, we're not having 2 weeks of vacation in an entire, year, slowing down, having periods of quiet. Nothing can replace that in addition to all the technology that we have. I think sometimes we have to go back in time and kind of just go back to a simpler life, cooking more often in the kitchen as opposed to doing fast food, right? So just a simple, basic life in addition to all this great technology that we have can make a huge difference, but not relying on the whack-a-mole approach, which is I have a symptom and that's when I'm going to go see my doctors. Every day, I think our body's telling us something, even fatigue, weight gain, insomnia. These are symptoms that our bodies are telling us that something's out of balance. We need to do something different. And most of that something could be oftentimes lifestyle. So I say, always start with lifestyle, see what you can do. Obviously use your physicians, get data, go get labs, go get tested to see if there's something wrong. So I think that there's a lot of useful information on, both ends of modern traditionals and the incorporation of lifestyle and an integrative approach.
Thank you.
Lifestyle is key, right? Like we have a integrative medicine health and lifestyle center, 25 years ago. And a lot of people said, why do you have lifestyle? Now there's lifestyle medicine. It's very interesting. It's a whole field, right? Because we understand the importance of diet and stress reduction and sleep and exercise and all these other things. But from our perspective, being very integrative, is I never want to throw out also what Jyoti's talking about is all these wonderful technologies. We can do testing. The problem is that a lot of times the testing is not focused to what we're looking for from an integrative or functional standpoint, or just by the sheer appointment. And on Saturday on the last video on the last lecture, I gave the test that your doctors usually don't order, because I like to educate the patients or people who come see me or people in general is understand you have a short time with your doctor, maybe less than 10 minutes, right? And so what can you provide them in this short period of time? I know that Ray and Jyothi like me will spend a lot more time with our patients because we're different type of clinicians. But in just the general system where people are being kind of shuffled in the factory medicine, as we call it, in that 10 minutes, then they need to be proactive. And if they have a basic minimal understanding of what can be tested, then they can help guide their practitioner or provider on helping them find a little bit more maybe possible imbalances. But there's a lot of things, even in a general primary care conventional testing, that does not test the dis-ease. They're just looking for the disease. And that's when we look at more of an integrative or functional approach, then that could be the best of everything. Because we're still using science and technology, but you still need to do the dietary and lifestyle changes to actually improve those functions.
Thank you. Ray, just to be clear, are you saying don't ever get your clothes dry cleaned again? Or are you saying something else?
So I'll tell you what I do. I launder all my shirts, so that's washing it with water. So the whole purpose of dry cleaning, just to be clear, the purpose of dry cleaning is so our clothes don't shrink. So we're dry cleaning is so our clothes don't shrink. So I launder all my shirts, and then I don't use a dry cleaner that uses perchloroethylene. I use a green dry cleaner. I'll give you this story. Because these chemicals are volatile, they are released from dry cleaners. So in New York City, there's lots of high rises, apartment buildings, and at the bottom of these high rises are dry cleaners. So they've done studies in New York City in which they found unsafe levels of this in the indoor air of the apartments above dry cleaners. Second, because it's fat soluble, you open the refrigerator and you look at the butter and the cheese, and you have this and the butter and the cheese in your refrigerator in your apartment above a dry cleaner in New York City. There are homes in Southern California, in Newport Beach, California, less than a half mile from where I went to high school, that have this and this in the playroom of multi-million-dollar homes in Newport Beach, California. These things are known to cause cancer. So would you asking me, would I avoid dry cleaning with trichloroethylene and perchloroethylene? Absolutely.
Okay. And also, are there natural medicines for Parkinson's? Is there an herb that you can use?
So there have been a couple studies. Vitamin E, coenzyme Q10 been both the best studied. Vitamin E shown not to be helpful. Coenzyme Q10 thought to be a benefit early in early trials. I like Dr. Pai's desire for rigor. In a larger clinical trial, not shown to be beneficial. These were all after people were diagnosed. We don't have a good sense of things to prevent or slow or possibly delay. We just we don't have the tools really to study that effectively. But the short answer is no, but Mediterranean diet and exercise, avoiding nerve toxicants in your food, water, and air.
Thank you.
And if I can jump in there, just because I want to add on to what Ray is talking about, is that some of these things with these chemicals are so bad that it's a larger discussion of like nobody wants to talk about it, because it's the chemical industries, right? Like, so when we talk about forever chemicals, or now we're talking about nanoparticles or plastics, and then he's talking about these are so commonly used in every city, in every place, that there's a huge industry. I mean, even EPA has difficulty with regulating a lot of these things, even with the latest studies on some of these. I think it was the forever chemicals, and also the chemicals that were in plastics just recently. I don't know if you saw that with EPA, is that it went all the way up to court, and then they got tagged on a little loopholes. Like the court said, yes, we know that these chemicals are damaging, and not only to the people, but to the environment, but we're not able to regulate it because that also might hurt an industry for economics, because everything's about economics now these days, right? Is that they don't want to regulate it. So there's a little bit of a challenge because there is options, and I'm sure like he can, as he pointed, there's green cleaners, but it's harder to find a green cleaner if you don't live in a place that may have that. And unless there's regulation to push that, people would want to go with something cheaper maybe, which is more harmful. So I think it's great that he's talking about these chemicals, because people need to look at it's like by them choosing how they shop or they buy or they consume their goods, that also changes industry, because the laws are never going to be fast enough and quick enough, and they'll be always probably challenged, so that it'll be slow, so that protection won't be there for the public. But the public can take a proactive approach immediately by saying, like what he's saying, well, I'm not going to do this, and that can change a lot in the industry, because then people would want to fill that void with maybe something safer.
And just on the dry cleaning, so I used to think how big of a deal could it be? You know, because I was thinking about my world, you know, how often do I get anything dry cleaned? And the answer is not very often. Then I got emails from people who said, you know, my husband worked every day in a blue collar job and was wearing a dry cleaned outfit every day for 30 years. And then, you know, you might look at this in a different light. And closed off gas, they release these chemicals. You know, when you bring in your dry cleaning into your car on your way home, you'll be breathing in these chemicals. When you put it into your closet, you're going to be breathing these chemicals. So I get really concerned about it. And we have to say, to what end? You know, we used DDT in World War II to prevent malaria. Okay, we'll take the trade-off between malaria and DDT. But are we going to really take the trade-off between causing leukemia in kids and having our clothes not shrink?
So if I have a suit that went to the dry cleaner and it's hanging in my closet in the plastic, should I throw the suit out, or should I, like, what do I do? Is it like...
Well, again, I'm a neurologist. I'm not an environmental scientist. I'm not a dry cleaning expert. I've learned more about dry cleaning than I ever cared to learn. I would take the suit outside, let it air out for some time, and then before bringing it into the home.
Okay. So Dr. Rao and Dr. Pai, so you've been doing this a while. So if you had to put together the last 1,000 patients that you each saw, and that followed what you said, the last 1,000 patients you saw in your practice that followed what you said, what actually happens to their weight, their blood sugar, their cholesterol, their blood pressure, and other key metrics? Did everyone get perfectly healthy, or did some people, their blood sugar or their weight or their cholesterol is stubborn and it just didn't respond enough? And then at that point, what did you do?
I want to go some. Yeah. So I think that, like when I said before, was everybody's journey is very, very different and unique. I think that it also depends on when they've started their journey versus when, you know, if they're mostly well. But anything from not having a diagnosis to having a diagnosis, I think can make some improvement in quality of life. Whether or not you reverse your actual diagnosis is one thing, but you can change markers of inflammation. You can lower fasting glucose, insulin resistance. You can lower lipids. So it's not all black and white, but what does consistently happen from the last, say, you know, significant amount of patients that listen to me are they're blown away by the power that lifestyle has. And they had no idea. And that is a consistent message that I get, whether they're completely reversed or just their weight goes down or just their insulin resistance goes down. Mostly everyone is, I had no idea that I had so much control over my health destiny and how much I could do to make a change, and how simple some of these things are. And so I think that is more of a consistent message than the actual numbers or changes in blood pressure. Now, metabolic syndrome, neurodegenerative health, you know, even things like cancers, and, you know, some of them don't budge sometimes with the things that I do. However, mostly everyone sleeps better. I'm also an acupuncturist. So, you know, using acupuncture has also taught me that it's never about one goal. It's a holistic look at the body. And these are some markers, but there's also a quality of life and optimism, a stress reduction, a peacefulness that you can walk through each day with that can increase. And sometimes that means that the markers aren't always perfect. So it's a very unique and personal journey for each person.
Thank you.
In my practice, I'm going to say 80%. So if people just follow just general recommendations, even what Jyoti's talking about, even what Ray's talking about, usually we'll see a huge change. And so it is more than what I agree with her. It's more than what they think, because most of these people have been taking drugs for their blood sugar, their cholesterol, or, you know, and all these other things. And literally by the lifestyle changes, they will see significant, sometimes what we see is many times more benefits without the side effects. We call it side benefits rather than side effects. However, it's not 100%. It's not even 90%. It's 80% what we say. And in everybody, it's kind of like this general epigenetic will change about 80% improvement in form and function. Why is it not 20%? Because that's why we have to start digging deeper, right? Because that's the whole individualistic aspect of your nutrition, your microbiome. You know, how is everything working? Your stress, your environment, what chemicals are not chemicals you're exposing to, or whatever. Your sleep, your social environment. So that's where then we have to fine tune it. That the problem is that's the bigger challenge, because most people can do the simple things, or what we would consider, I think, simple, but it's a harder thing because, like, if you live in a city that's really loud and noisy and there's a dry cleaner below you, that's a problem, right? There's, or vice versa, right? If you live in a food desert, you don't have access to some of the things that is healthy. So that's the challenge I think that we will see with a lot of patients is economics, access, some of these things that are, again, a little bit out of their control, but we still know that we can still improve it. So it's not like just a lot of people want to have the perfect. I think that's the problem with America right now. It's like we want to have the perfect plan and we want to have everything ready to make the recipe, for example. And if we don't, we won't make it. And we have to be more loose and open, saying, you know what, we can still make the food. It's just missing a spice or two. It still be fantastic. Don't worry about it. And that's the kind of part of being a chef in the medicine world, is that you know how to really play with everything rather than being a cook and just trying to follow a recipe. And I think a lot of people are trying to follow recipes so perfectly, and then they're hard on themselves, triggers more inflammation, triggers more stress. I like to be like, people have to be really flexible, because sometimes we can excel in one area very well and then have trouble. So some people may be able to exercise really well and know nothing about what to do in the kitchen, right? So I think we have to also educate our clients or point them in directions on how to improve those lifestyle factors so that they get a little bit of everything, even if it's not coming firsthand to them.
And one more thing I wanted to say was one of the hidden pieces of things, and information that I personally have learned over 30 years is that trauma in people's lives really hold back healing. And so that is a huge out of control segment. So for those people that I'm like, why isn't the needle moving? Whether they're, living in this environment that's polluted, or having a toxic relationship at home, or a work relationship that I don't know about, or something of that nature, I've found that trauma, especially in childhood or in the first 2 decades of their life, can actually really impair healing and the rate of healing as an adult.
Thank you. Aside from diet, sleep, and exercise, and avoiding chemicals, do you want to give your thoughts on nutritional supplements, vitamins, and minerals? Is there basic foundational ones that you think we should all be taking? Should we be avoiding them? What is your, I know you can't give us a personal recommendation because you don't know us and our blood and all that, but if you had to do a general assessment of what people in general need, how would you advise us on that topic?
You want to go? I always start with, we do testing. We test for nutrients in our office. We test gut microbiome. So a lot of our testing, our supplement recommendations are based on tests. But in general, one of the things that I see over and over again is magnesium deficiency. And magnesium is a huge nutrient that does 300 things in our body. I think getting magnesium through green leafy vegetables and fruits and nuts and seeds and avocados is wonderful. But sometimes people need more help because it does things like help us sleep. It helps with constipation, helps with anxiety, it helps with headaches and muscle tension. So magnesium is one thing that I talk about a lot with my patients. And we do talk about prebiotics to help the growth of the gut microbiome, as opposed to probiotics, which are, something that can only give you the fixed amount of organisms in each capsule. So food that grows the gut microbiome, nutrients, and especially in the plant-based world, B12, zinc, vitamin D, are some key players that over and over again I've needed to supplement because we can't sometimes get it enough through our diet.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll go. So I wasn't sure. I was giving Ray. So yeah, I agree. I agree. Like there's certain things that you'll see that are common that are deficiencies, and so we also test, and so that's a good thing. And we try to push the food that those nutrients are heavily found in first, because food is medicine in our practice. You can see with all the spices here, and then we like to look at targeted aspects of things that, because I'm trying to avoid redundancy, and I think the challenge that I think we all see as providers is that people are taking the same thing over and over again that may not be something that's truly deficient or truly needed. And that's where testing I like, and I think Jyothi would agree, is like it really helps guide us and also helps guide the patient, because usually they come in and they might be on 8 to 10 pharmaceutical drugs in America. That's the average person I see, and then they'll be on like 8 to 15 supplements, right, from all the healthcare providers and health stores and online and whatnot. And so, but they're still not feeling good. So we really want to look at like what is targeted for them. And so my specialty in integrative medicine is formulation of product and looking at, again, evidence-based in terms of putting nutraceuticals together. And that's where I try to look at like, what can we get from food and really push it from food. And then things like she was talking about, what Jyoti's talking about, like, yeah, someone's going to come out with a magnesium deficiency, say 800 milligrams deficient, then it's going to be harder to get that from a source of food, especially in the time frame that we're looking to get the patient having improvement of symptoms. And therefore, a supplement would be important. But the key is what most people are concerned about supplements is quality, potency, purity, safety, and efficacy. And that's one thing that with having a practitioner who's either educated in that or is able to provide guidance on where to get or how to read a label or what to look for manufacturing, then that's when we kind of can help take it to the next level. I think doctors who don't play around with supplements have the right to say don't take anything, because it's true. If you go to the store every day, there's a study showing that most of these supplements are don't have what the label contains or may have adulterants or actually may be harmful. But then there's a huge data set. If you get the right product, the right potency, purity, safety, and efficacy, you can have wonderful benefits of taking supplements. But I think it's always making sure that it's targeted, so we're not just being redundant and taking something that we don't need. We need to be taking something that we might need or we might need more of, and that creates a physical effect in the body, and that makes people will say, I feel better from taking it, rather than I take all these things, but I'm not sure what's working.
Thank you.
I defer to my colleagues. I learned from them.
So Ray, you wrote a book about Parkinson's, a really difficult health challenge that 100% of people would do anything to avoid. And there's not a lot of books on Parkinson. Maybe in the research areas there are, but to the public, I don't see too many. When I look for speakers for the conference, it's hard to find someone who wrote a book on Parkinson's. So in my mind, you're a hero. Are you a hero or not in your area? Is everyone embracing you? Is everyone saying this information's fantastic? Let's spread it to med schools. Let's tell everyone. Let's stop dry cleaning. What has been the response to your work?
So let me name some heroes. So Michael J. Fox, there's a hero. For 30 years, not only has he bared the burden of Parkinson's disease, which he said publicly he thinks is due to some kind of environmental toxin, but he's been the face of a disease. It's really hard to have Parkinson's disease or any disease. It's really hard to beat that and be the face of it. His foundation, because of him, has raised $2 billion over the last 20 years. I think we as a community are failing Michael J. Fox. We have not addressed it. A second hero is Dr. Caroline Tanner. She's the heroine of our book. She's a Parkinson's specialist and epidemiologist at University of California, San Francisco. For the past 40 years, she's been telling us that environmental toxins, including Paraquat, including trichloroethylene, including perchloroethylene, including air pollution, are fueling the rise of Parkinson's disease, and we haven't listened to her. I think we're stuck in the wrong paradigm. We're trained in a biomedical view, a lens of health, whereby diseases are either a function of aging or a function of genetics. And let me be clear that Parkinson's disease is not a natural consequence of aging. Parkinson's disease is not a natural consequence of aging. You put mice in the laboratory and you let them live a nice long life, they don't spontaneously develop Parkinson's disease, nor they spontaneously, to my knowledge, develop Alzheimer's disease. These are products of our environment. And when you're trying to push a new idea, you encounter resistance. The resistance is among your peers and those who are senior to you because they grew up in this paradigm. The newer generation, you tell the newer generation, anyone under 30, that environmental toxins are causing disease, and they go, of course, tell me something I don't know. So I think there's resistance and there's industry resistance. I've had law firms sending people to issue subpoenas at my front door and having my 18-year-old son have to answer the door. We should find that completely and morally unacceptable. We should hold wrongdoers accountable. We should name these law firms. We should name the chemical companies that are doing it. We as a community of physicians and scientists and health advocates should find this incredibly unacceptable. We're finding pesticides in Cheerios, according to the Environmental Working Group. If Cheerios has pesticides in it, then what other foods have pesticides and other chemicals into it? And why is our health getting worse? Why is cancer rates increasing under people under the age of 50 in the United States at the same time smoking is decreasing? Why is life expectancy less, even ignoring COVID today, than it was 25 years ago? And we're spending more on healthcare. Why are we spending 20% of GDP, $4 trillion on healthcare to get 5 years less life expectancy than our peers in France? Clearly, we're doing something wrong. Clearly, someone is doing something bad to us. We need to find out who those wrongdoers are and find them and hold them accountable.
Amen, brother. I completely agree with that.
Yes,
I completely agree with that. The challenges, I think, is exactly the same. It's like, we're taught about a disease model, and environmental exposures and toxins wasn't in that training, but that's becoming more and more of an issue. I think with Michael J. Fox, what they found, you probably know more than that, but it's like, when we had that start of early symptoms of Parkinson's, there was a cluster on the set when they followed on one of the Back to the Future films, I forget which one, of people that had Parkinson's, right? So that kind of led like, wow, it's not just one person, but it was a few people, and few people at one time, so there's definitely like the odds of just a genetic, no, odds of this, no, but it has to be some kind of, exposures, has to be some, related to something. I don't know if we have that full answer, but these are certain things that we're now seeing, when we see this explosion. And literally, I think the problem right now with the aging population, which is sinking our healthcare costs with neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's and dementias and Alzheimer's, and just there's memory care units everywhere I see around my city. Is that it's such a debilitating condition, because when you can't remember or you can't function correctly, then the cost of that healthcare, even though the rest of the person might have pretty healthy body, it's super expensive, and that's going to bankrupt the country. It's going to bankrupt the whole system, and that's what the data actually shows. What's going to happen is these neurocognitive disorders is going to sink the whole economy, because there is not a quick fix, because it's multifactorial. I think a lot of these chemicals he's talking about, absolutely. And there's probably 100 more that we don't even know. And there's even synergies with, not only like we talked about synergy of nutrients for improving your function, right? Like adding more spice or adding more phytonutrients to your diet. But what about the synergy of chemicals? How certain chemicals can enhance further chemicals, because we only study even one saying it's toxic. What about 10 of them together? How is there a super toxic? And there probably is, right? There's certain things that probably enhance absorption or crossing blood-brain barrier, other things like that. So there is an issue, and those people and those companies should be held accountable. The problem is, since schools and funding are educated related to corporations in this, there's a little bit of like nobody wants to have a letter like he's getting sent to their, because we don't have the defense fund to defend that. But I appreciate when people come out and speak, because it's through the awareness and education, and I think it's through the people. At the end of the day, people have more power than they think, is that we can take on a corporation, and it can happen. There can be class action lawsuits. It's just more people have to be participated. I think on the Paraquat, that was actually turned down the other day, I think, if you're following the news. So we know all the dangers of it. There's so much influence in industry. It's like they don't want an industry that makes billions of dollars, so they'll rather have that go on than save for public safety. So it is an issue, and I really appreciate everything that Ray had to say.
Thank you.
Just a couple of notes on Dr. Pai. He's well versed. So Michael J. Fox was part of a cluster. This has been public reported in the New York Times and in the neurology literature. 3 other people on he was working on a sitcom called Leo and Me before he did Family Ties. They were all working in an underground studio. At least three other individuals all had relatively early onset Parkinson's. Again, he said to Jane Pauley that he thinks he got Parkinson's from exposure to some kind of toxin. And then Paraquat is a weed killer. It kills the weeds that Roundup doesn't. It's been used to commit homicide and suicide. The EPA's own website says 1 sip can kill. Over 30 countries, including China, have banned it. The United States has not. It reauthorized its use. It's being sprayed on fields, on corn, cotton, soybean, and vineyards, including in upstate New York, 20-30 minutes from where I'm sitting right now. It's associated with a 150% increased risk of Parkinson's disease.
Thank you. When we have this conference, we talk a lot about heart disease and just obesity and the pancreas for diabetes. And then every now and then the word thyroid or liver or adrenals gets thrown out. And most of us don't really know too much about it. And we're not that interested in it. We just don't want anything bad to happen to it. So is there anything special we need to know about taking care of our thyroid or liver or adrenals, or is the same advice that you're giving us for everything else cover this? Or, is there something specific we're supposed to know, like taking iodine or something specific?
Well, I think that the adrenals are critical to our stress response, and the cortisol, which is a hormone released by the adrenals, is in charge of many of our other hormones, including thyroid and sex hormones, estrogen, progesterone. So my obsession in my practice is always about not just adrenals, but the stress response. So I do focus a lot on the adrenals, and the adrenals love nutrients. And so magnesium, vitamin C, B vitamins, just like any other organ, it needs it to, and a calm stress response. So being in a parasympathetic state, having a high vagal tone helps your adrenal gland. The thyroid also is very sensitive to cortisol changes, and it's another wonderful gland. I don't think there's any gland that in the body or organ in the body that we should forget about, but each one has a major role. And I think the third organ you said was liver.
I said thyroid, liver, or adrenals.
Oh, liver. Liver is one of the major ones, I think. And so again, when you talk about things that are detoxifying, it is probably the most overworked organ in our whole body. It's constantly on. It's constantly trying to detoxify our thoughts, because our thoughts even relate to cortisol response. It manages our hormones, it manages our supplements and our meds and all the toxins out there. So I do think we need to respect the liver, and because of phase 1 and phase 2, which turns fat soluble things into water soluble, that's its job, and that's one of its jobs anyway. So I think that we have to respect all these organs, and the key to all of these organs is nutrients, and good quality nutrients, and a diverse amount of nutrients, and that comes from the fiber we talked about. And I think that's the tie into everything, because even the thyroid needs selenium and iodine and vitamin D and zinc and all of these nutrients. So the key common denominator for every one of these organ functions is nutrients, and good quality nutrients. So it comes back to the gut. Everything's connected.
Thank you. Dr. Pai, any thoughts on that?
Okay, so I just was giving Ray this opportunity. So I feel like I'm always going second. I just want to change it around. So yeah, I agree. So one of the things that I mentioned in my last lecture was looking at thyroid, because a lot of people, here's another thing, right? So going with Ray's environmental issues is that we start seeing more thyroid dysfunction. Like I don't remember seeing so much thyroid dysfunction in primary care patients before. There's always a subset of people that would come in with having some hypothyroid, but now there's so many people that have thyroid dysfunction issues, and particularly the conversion of the thyroid hormones. So they have like very low T3 levels or free T3 levels, and they don't convert to T4 to T3 very well. We also see in my practice a higher rate of Hashimoto's thyroiditis. So like, the more inflammatory aspects of that. And we kind of follow those things. So in the lecture, I talked about like, these are tests that you should ask your doctor if you're having symptoms, because most people just do a screening TSH and that was it. We really want to look at if they're having some of these subclinical symptoms, or they're slightly off. There's things just naturally in the diet, like she was talking about, that can help balance these things. You don't need to have drugs for everything, or even sometimes iodine, for example. You can measure those things, but really we want to look at if someone has symptoms, we want to further define whether that's from that system or having that dysfunction. And if not, then eliminate that whole discussion altogether, because people can also spin themselves out of control. They think they're fatigued. They might think it's thyroid. It may not be. They take high dose of thyroid iodine, and after 6 milligrams, 10% flip into a Hashimoto's thyroiditis, right? So there's always this delicate balance, and a lot of people want to, again, just do a magic bullet theory with things. So we want to look at balancing. When it comes to adrenals, I agree with her. Stress response. Everybody's cortisol levels, if you test it, is going to be off on some level, unless you're not living in the United States in 2024 or the planet Earth right now. So we like to look at a lot of, aside of the techniques that she was talking about with meditation and mindfulness and exercise that he was talking about, is look, I use a lot of adaptogens. I'm a traditional Ayurvedic and Chinese medicine trained in that, adding adaptogens to help adapt and balance that cortisol level. Because it's not about ignoring something. It's just a lot of people have a lot of stress. A lot of people have to take care of elderly patients, or they have 3 jobs, or they're trying to get, something's happening. So it's not stimulants that we're trying to avoid. We're trying to avoid the whole, America's running on Dunkin', Starbucks, and, energy drinks, which is the wrong way of doing it. But it's how do we increase stamina, vitality, and resilience to this stress? And in terms of also just the diet and lifestyle, don't get me wrong, but there's still things, I think, on top of that most of us will still have unwanted stress, because if you turn on the television, or are you keeping any kind of consciousness of what's happening in America, there's going to be stress. So it's how do we get ourselves stronger, because it's going to get sometimes worse, right? You might live in a place where climate's becoming more of a problem, or homelessness is a problem, or the economics of rent is going up, right? So those are things that, how do we prevent someone from not being so stressful that becomes counterproductive, where then they have more inflammation and decrease and suppression of the immune system. And lastly, liver. Yes, yes, yes. Again, diet's a huge factor, but there are certain nutrients that we give and there's certain formulas that we can. So if we see liver function or liver dysfunction with their enzymes being up, AST, ALT, alkaline phosphatase, or even having glutathione and alpha lipoic levels or other things that we look at detoxification markers that are low, then there are going to be certain things that we can provide either by diet or through lifestyle or natural therapies that will target that, because we can help improve those functions directly.
Thank you.
So
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I'm a neurologist, so I have clear biases, but and I tend to have blinders on when I'm looking at Parkinson's disease. But the more I look at Parkinson's disease, the more I find that these toxins their effects are not limited to Parkinson's disease, or they extend to other brain diseases, and they extend to other organs. So just as an example, trichloroethylene and perchloroethylene at Camp Lejeune have been associated with increased risks of thyroid cancer, lots of thyroid disease, and TCs associated with an increased risk of liver cancer.
If I can ask a question to Ray, do you mind?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say, is there testing, because this is not my specialty, of testing for those chemicals, like a blood test or any kind of, I mean, they're not conventional, obviously. They're going to be some kind of esoteric environmental testing, but is there testing that people could do to measure those things?
So
For
there's
those
nothing
who are
that
wearing dry clean shirts every day.
Yeah,
Not me,
so-
thankfully. Now I feel really good that I didn't do any dry cleaning. I thought I was just lazy, but it's good.
If you have ongoing exposure, you can find it. So a study done in Italy found that 3/4 of men in Italy had trichloroethylene in their urine, just to tell you how widespread it used to be. Some pesticides are fat soluble, so you, in theory, could do a fat biopsy and look for this. So this is how they measure DDT and other chemicals. Sometimes they measure it in the milk of nursing women. And so you can see DDT and metabolites of different pesticides in the milk of nursing women, even today in different parts of the world. And obviously then that's passed on to the children, and they're developing relatively unprotected brains. These chemicals also many of them cross the placenta and expose developing fetuses to them as well.
Wow.
But there are very few people doing widespread testing, even
Yeah.
in research settings.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, because I think that's something that if there was something that was available, just like how we're testing nutrients and just like heavy metals or other toxins, that's something that would push and shift public support of getting rid of these things, because then they'll come in and have this huge amount of data saying like, hey, this is how, just like you're saying, like this is how many people every day walking off the street has these in their body, and we need to reduce that.
Agree.
If each of you could make a quick closing statement, and also how we could follow up and stay in touch with you. Dr. Pai, you want to go first?
Sure. My name is Dr. Pai. I practice integrative medicine. I'm the president and founder of Sanjevani Integrative Medicine Health and Lifestyle Center for 25 years here. I'm evidence-based. If someone wants to come see me, we do in person, and we also do telehealth. Most of my patients now are telehealth all around the country and all around the world. We're able to send the laboratory kits. We're able to send the products, and we're able to help you through evidence-based manners to get to the root cause of your dysfunction, imbalance, or disease and help restore that function. And I'm always available. I'm glad to provide a second eyes, ears, or a secondary opinion on helping you with your other providers improve your health outcomes. You can go to sanjevani.net, SANJEVANI.net, to learn more about our practice, or you can get my book, An Inflammation Nation, learn a little bit more about the 10 steps to help prevent, reverse, and treat almost all diseases naturally through diet and lifestyle and the use of natural anti-inflammatories. And you can go to sanjevanistore.com if you're interested in looking at any of our products, such as Bosmeric or anything else.
Thank you. Ray, how about you?
First of all, thanks, Steve, again, for the opportunity to be with you. I learned a lot on this. I never thought I would be a participant on The Real Truth About Health, and never thought I would learn so much about nutrition and health from different perspectives than are traditionally in the mainstream. Ordinary people like us changed the course of polio with the March of Dimes. Ordinary people, Americans like us, changed the course of drinking and driving when a mom who lost her daughter due to an accident, fallen mad, and made drinking and driving socially unacceptable. Ordinary people like us in the 1980s responded to an HIV threat and said that silence equals death. and barricaded themselves in the streets of New York, overtook the New York Stock Exchange and pharmaceutical companies because they were charging too much for their effective treatments. It's on us to change the course of Parkinson's disease and other brain diseases. I think we now know what the likely causes of these diseases are. When you have that knowledge, you have a responsibility. You also have an obligation to reciprocate from the gifts we've received from previous generations. And I can't think of a better gift that we can do as a physician than to create a world where the diseases we care for are increasingly rare instead of increasingly common. We wrote this book, Ending Parkinson's, a Prescription for Action, to do exactly that. You can get it on Amazon. All the authors are donating all of our proceeds to efforts to prevent and end the disease. If you can't afford a copy, you can just email me at info@endingpd.org with your name and address, and we'll send you a copy for free. Thanks.
And if someone wants to stay in touch with you, or do you do telemedicine? Do you do consultations?
Yeah, I see patients, and I started doing telemedicine in 2007. But if they have ideas, suggestions, or stories, or they disagree or can educate me, they can just email me at info@endingpd.org.
Great. Thank you very much. And Dr. Rao?
Thanks again for having me on this. One of my passions, I've been in medicine for 30 years and working in New York after residency, I was really disillusioned by the ineffectiveness of what I had learned in medical school and residency, and acupuncture changed my world. And it showed me healing versus, putting out fires type of an approach. And in my practice, as I've cultivated over 30 years, is really my passion is to educate people and scream it from the rooftops and tell people how much control they have over their health, and talk about the lifestyle, talk about integrative medicine, and talk about the way that you can improve your health with just simple things that you can do. And that's really my passion, is to educate. And we wrote this book with the cardiologist, Dr. Monica Agarwal. We wrote a cookbook, and we wrote a Body on Fire book. And I do a lot of educational seminars, lectures, talks, teaching to help even medical students and residents to fellows to kind of learn about things that we weren't taught traditionally. But I think my mission statement is really to put the power back in the patient, put the power back in how much role you have in your future health by just kind of focusing on lifestyle, using, find providers that can help you along the way, use testing, use evidence-based medicine, but really, really, really foundationally focus on lifestyle. And that's the message that I want to give to everyone, is really there's a lot of power in you, and we're very resilient, and we can learn about things and fight this thing. And just in terms of just how to reach me is rawwellness.com. I'm in Maryland. I do telehealth, but I'm only licensed in a few states, but we are happy to educate. I have webinars and podcasts, as well as other lectures on my website if anyone wants to learn. And I have a Facebook Live every other Friday.
Is this the website to find you at, the one that we just had up on the screen?
rawwellness.com, yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you very much. Can we unmute the audience so they can thank you?
All right.
Thank you all so much.
Thank
Good
you.
job. Thank you. Beautiful. Wonderful. All of you.
Big ones out of the small ones.